Donald L. Clark wasn't a lawyer. He was a janitor, a man who cleaned courtrooms, not defended people in them. But on that morning in downtown Los Angeles, when billionaire Deborah D. Mijares sat alone at the defense table, her high-powered attorney mysteriously missing, Donald stepped forward with a file folder in his shaking hands and said the words that froze the entire room. "I will fight for her." Reporters gasped. Prosecutors laughed. Deborah stared at him like he'd lost his mind. But here's what they didn't know. This wasn't the first time Donald had faced down powerful enemies, and the conspiracy that took Deborah's lawyer was the same kind that destroyed Donald's life 20 years ago. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice, courage, and second chances, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe that everyone, whether they're a billionaire entrepreneur or a courthouse janitor, deserves a real shot at justice, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stories like Donald's deserve to be heard, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's go back and see how a man who'd lost everything found the courage to risk it all one more time. But first, ask yourself this. What would it take for you to step out of the shadows after 20 years of hiding? What would make you stand up when the entire world expected you to stay invisible? The morning sunlight of Los Angeles filtered through the tall windows of the Superior Court, casting golden streaks across the polished marble floors that Donald L. Clark had just finished cleaning. 5:30 a.m. Just like every morning for the past 18 years, he was already there. A 52-year-old man, with silver threading through his dark hair and tired brown eyes, dressed in a forest green maintenance uniform with the word maintenance embroidered in white thread on the chest pocket. The name tag simply read, Donald. The tiny one-bedroom apartment in Inglewood was still dark when he left at 4:45 a.m. The space had only a worn couch that doubled as his bed, a hot plate, a mini-fridge, and a bare wall adorned with just two photographs. One was a black-and-white image of himself at his University of Chicago Law School graduation cap gown, eyes full of hope. Beside it hung a picture of his son, Michael, at age 7, smiling in a Little League uniform. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. Donald didn't turn on the lights when he left home. Summer utility bills in Los Angeles were brutal, and with a salary of $2,400 a month, every dollar mattered. Breakfast was instant coffee, a single egg, and whatever day-old pastries he salvaged from the courthouse cafeteria, a small privilege for maintenance staff. That morning, as he pushed his cleaning cart down the third-floor hallway, Donald paused in front of courtroom 14, what he privately called the place where empires fall. Today, one of the most significant corporate trials in California history was set to begin. The lawsuit against Deborah D. Mijares, the Miami-based clean energy billionaire worth $8.3 billion. He didn't hear about the case from the news. He didn't own a television. But he knew everything from the nights he spent cleaning that very courtroom. He'd seen the polished attorneys, overheard their strategies when they believed no one was listening. To them, the janitor was just furniture. Invisible. Not worth noticing. But Donald hadn't always been invisible. 18 years ago, he had been one of the brightest legal minds at Morrison & Lang, a prestigious firm with offices in Chicago and D.C. He'd had a corner office overlooking the Chicago River, a reputation for never losing a major case, and a future so bright it hurt to look at directly. Until everything collapsed in a single week. He pushed the memories away. That was the past. Now, he mopped floors, polished wooden benches, emptied trash bins. It was honest work. It paid the rent. It kept him alive. And most importantly, it kept him hidden. As Donald was about to leave the courtroom, his phone buzzed a text from his supervisor, Clark. Courtroom 14 needs another pass. High-profile case today. Make it spotless. Donald exhaled slowly. High-profile meant cameras, scrutiny, reporters everywhere, and countless opportunities to be yelled at for the smallest smudge on a window. But as always, he didn't complain. Complaining got you fired. Staying quiet kept you employed. By 9 a.m., the courtroom was absolutely packed. Reporters squeezed into every available seat. Lawyers straightened their ties and checked their briefcases one last time. Camera shutters clicked like a swarm of mechanical insects. At the defense table, Deborah D. Mijares sat completely alone. She was 38, but looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her once sharp blue eyes were clouded with exhaustion and barely contained panic. Her blue designer blouse was immaculate, her hair perfectly styled, yet her slightly hunched shoulders and white-knuckled grip on the edge of the table betrayed the terror consuming her from the inside out. Next to her were 5 empty chairs, the seats reserved for her legal team from Whitmore, Shaw and Associates, the most expensive law firm in California, charging $8,500 an hour. But they weren't there. None of them. Donald checked the clock on the wall. 9:17 a.m. The trial would begin in 13 minutes. And that was when Judge Helen entered, her black robes sweeping behind her, her face set in stone. She was known throughout the California court system as someone who didn't tolerate games, delays, or excuses. "Counsel," she said sharply, her eyes scanning the empty defense table with visible irritation. "Where is your legal team, Miss Mijares?" Deborah rose slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, I don't know. My attorney, Amanda Fox, she told me she'd be here. I've called her 12 times this morning. Nothing. Her office says they can't reach her either." A ripple of shocked whispers spread through the gallery. Cameras flashed like lightning. Keyboards clacked as reporters rushed to get the story out. The lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man in an immaculate gray suit named Kenneth L. Thomas, leaned forward with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Your Honor, if the defense is unprepared to proceed, we respectfully request the court issue a summary judgment in favor of the prosecution." Judge Helen's jaw tightened. She looked at Deborah with something that might have been sympathy or might have been contempt. "Miss Mijares, do you have any legal representation at all? Anyone?" Deborah opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her hands trembled. Her billion-dollar empire, her life's work, her entire future, all of it hung by a thread that was about to snap. And that was when Donald stepped forward. His cleaning cart was still beside him, mop leaning against it. His rubber gloves were still on his hands. The folder, a legal file he'd found beneath the defense table while sweeping 30 minutes earlier, was clutched in his trembling, gloved fingers. "Your Honor," Donald said, his voice rough from years of silence, uncertain, yet somehow unbreakable. Every single head in the courtroom turned toward him. Security guards tensed. Reporters' eyes went wide. The prosecutors looked confused, then amused. Donald took one step forward, then another. "Your Honor," he repeated, louder this time, "I will fight for her." The courtroom exploded. "Who the hell is that?" Someone shouted. "Is this a joke?" Another voice called out. Prosecutors burst into open laughter. One of them actually slapped the table in amusement. Judge Helen's gavel slammed down once, twice, 3 times before the chaos subsided enough for her to speak. "Sir," she said, her voice ice-cold, "who are you, and what exactly do you think you're doing?" Donald's hands were shaking so badly the folder nearly slipped from his grip. His heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to apologize, to disappear back into the invisible safety of his maintenance uniform. But he looked at Deborah, and Deborah looked back at him. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't mocking him. She was staring at him with the desperate hope of someone who'd just been thrown a lifeline in the middle of drowning. "My name is Donald L. Clark, Your Honor," he said, forcing his voice steady. "And I'm here to represent Miss Mijares." Judge Helen raised one eyebrow. "You're an attorney?" Donald hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "I was trained as one, Your Honor." University of Chicago Law School. I never took the bar exam, but I know the law, and I know this case is wrong. The laughter started again. But this time, it was nervous, uncertain. Because something in Donald's voice, something in the way he stood there, still wearing his janitor's uniform, still holding that folder like it was the most important document in the world, made people pause. Judge Helen studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Deborah. "Miss Mijares, do you want this man to represent you?" Deborah didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger now. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." Judge Helen let out a long breath, then nodded slowly. "Mr. Clark, you have exactly 48 hours to provide this court with valid credentials or find proper counsel. Until then, I'm granting a temporary continuance. We'll reconvene on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Don't make me regret this." The gavel came down. And just like that, Donald L. Clark, the invisible janitor, stepped back into the world that had destroyed him 20 years ago. That night, Donald sat alone in his Inglewood apartment, staring at the photograph on the wall, the one of himself in his University of Chicago Law School graduation cap and gown. 20 years ago, that man had been unstoppable. He'd graduated third in his class, earned a federal clerkship in Washington, D.C., and at just 28 years old, was recruited by Morrison & Lang, one of the most powerful energy sector law firms in America. They offered him $185,000 a year, a corner office, and a future that seemed limitless. For 2 years, he was brilliant. He won cases that senior partners couldn't crack. His name appeared in legal journals. People whispered that Donald L. Clark was going places. Until he found the memo. It was buried in a routine contract review for a refinery project in Houston, Texas. A maintenance worker named David L. Palmer had died in an explosion, officially ruled an accident. But Donald discovered internal emails, proving the company knew about faulty equipment for 6 months and did nothing. They'd falsified safety reports, bribed inspectors, and buried evidence. Donald went to his supervising partner, believing the firm would do the right thing. Instead, they destroyed him. Within a week, fabricated emails appeared in his name, messages suggesting he'd taken bribes, falsified billable hours, stolen client files. His reputation collapsed overnight. The Bar Association rejected his application, citing ethical violations. His name was blacklisted across every major firm in the country. His colleagues, people he'd trusted, testified against him to save their own careers. His fiancée left. His mentor turned his back. And Donald, broken and alone, returned to California with his infant son, Michael, taking whatever work he could find. Dishwasher, warehouse loader, security guard. Eventually, he became a janitor. A job where no one asked questions and no one looked twice. He learned to stay invisible. It was safer that way. For 18 years, he convinced himself that the law wasn't for people like him. It was for those with power, money, and connections. People like the ones who destroyed him. But now, standing in that courtroom, looking into Deborah Mijares' exhausted eyes, seeing the same desperation, the same betrayal, he'd once felt something shifted. Maybe he couldn't save himself back then. But maybe, just maybe, he could save her now. Donald picked up his phone and opened a contact he hadn't touched in 3 years. Michael L. Clark. Austin. TX. His fingers hovered over the screen, trembling. Then he typed, "Son, I need your help. It's time I stopped hiding." He pressed send before he could change his mind. The next morning, Deborah met Donald at a small diner 3 blocks from the courthouse. She looked like she hadn't slept, dark circles under her eyes, coffee cup shaking slightly in her hands. "You want to know who I am?" she said, her voice tight. "Fine. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, middle-class neighborhood. Nothing special. My parents ran a hardware store. I learned to fix things before I learned to read." She stared out the window, remembering. I built my first startup in a Miami garage when I was 24. Mijar Tech. 10 years later, I invented a self-recharging energy cell, a battery that could power itself indefinitely using ambient thermal fluctuations. No charging, no degradation, revolutionary. Donald listened, watching her carefully. By 36, I was worth $8 billion. Forbes covers, TED Talks, the whole thing. Her voice hardened. And then 6 months ago, a tech competitor from Silicon Valley, Nextcore Solutions, filed a lawsuit claiming I stole their proprietary technology, complete fabrication. But suddenly, I'm fighting for my life. And your lawyer? Donald asked quietly. Deborah's jaw clenched. Amanda Fox, best corporate litigator in California. We'd been working together for 4 months. She knew this case inside and out. Then yesterday morning, she just vanished. Phone off. Office locked. Her assistant claimed she'd resigned effective immediately. But Amanda never said a word to me. Nothing. Donald opened the folder he'd found beneath the defense table. Inside were fragmented legal documents, half-printed motions, scattered notes. These are your case files? He asked. What's left of them? Deborah said bitterly. When I went to Amanda's office yesterday, half the digital files were gone, erased. Donald's eyes sharpened. He flipped through pages, his mind clearly working. Your security badge logs, he said suddenly. Who had access to your company servers in the last month? Deborah blinked. How do you… Just tell me. Me. Our IT director and Amanda's legal team. Donald pulled out his phone, opening a notes app. And your email correspondence with Amanda? Do you have backups? Some, but key messages are missing. Entire threads about evidence we'd gathered. Donald nodded slowly, his expression darkening. This wasn't random. Someone systematically dismantled your defense from the inside. Deborah stared at him, shocked. You're talking like a federal prosecutor, not a janitor. I told you, Donald said quietly. I was trained for this. For a long moment, Deborah studied him, this weathered man in a faded jacket, who somehow understood complex legal manipulation better than attorneys charging $10,000 an hour. Finally, she exhaled. Okay, she said. You have 48 hours before Judge Helen demands credentials. Help me figure out what happened to Amanda and who's trying to destroy me. If you can do that. She paused. Then maybe you really can fight for me. Donald extended his hand. Then let's get to work. Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Donald walked into courtroom 14, still wearing his forest green maintenance uniform. He hadn't owned a suit in 15 years, and buying one now felt like pretending to be someone he no longer was. The moment he sat beside Deborah at the defense table, the whispers started. Is he serious? This is a joke. Right? Prosecutor Kenneth L. Thomas smirked openly. Your Honor, I see the defense has opted for casual attire. Laughter rippled through the gallery. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward, sensing a spectacle. Judge Helen's expression remained stone. Mr. Clark, you have 48 hours remaining. Don't waste my time. Proceed, Mr. Thomas. Thomas called his first witness, Dr. Brandon J. Moore, a technology consultant from San Jose, who claimed Deborah had stolen proprietary designs from Nextcore Solutions. Dr. Brandon J. Moore was polished, confident, expensive suit, rehearsed testimony. He walked the jury through complex engineering diagrams, explaining how Deborah's self-recharging cell was identical to Nextcore's prototype. When Thomas finished, he sat down with a satisfied grin. Judge Helen looked at Donald. Your witness, Mr. Clark. Donald stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly. Then, he picked up a document from the folder. Dr. Moore, Donald began, his voice quiet but steady. You testified that my client's energy cell design matches Nextcore's prototype, dated March 15, 2023. Correct? That's correct. And you reviewed the engineering schematics yourself? I did. Donald held up a page. Then can you explain why the timestamp metadata on this document shows it was created on June 22, 2023, 3 months after Miss Mijares filed her original patent application? The courtroom went silent. Dr. Moore blinked. That must be an error. An error? Donald's voice sharpened. He pulled out another document. Your expert report claims Miss Mijares used a lithium ceramic composite, but her actual patent filed 14 months ago specifies a graphene aluminum alloy, 2 completely different materials. Did you even read her actual work, Dr. Moore, or just the version someone fed you? Moore's face flushed. I reviewed what was provided. By whom? NextCore's legal team? The same company paying you $250,000 for this testimony? Objection! Kenneth shot to his feet. Sustained, Judge Helen said, but her eyes were locked on the witness. Donald didn't stop. He systematically tore apart Moore's testimony, exposing forged timestamps, manipulated lab reports, contradictions in dates, fabricated test results. His questions were surgical, relentless, devastating. Within 20 minutes, Dr. Moore was sweating, stammering, backtracking. The gallery had stopped laughing. Reporters filmed intensely, phones raised, capturing every word. Deborah stared at Donald like she was seeing him for the first time. Finally, Donald returned to his seat. Judge Helen leaned forward. Mr. Clark, I don't know where you learned to cross-examine like that, but you have 48 hours to prove you're qualified to be in my courtroom. Dismissed. Outside, Deborah grabbed Donald's arm. Who are you? She demanded. Donald looked at her, exhausted. 20 years ago, he said quietly, I was supposed to be a lawyer. A good one. But I uncovered something powerful people wanted buried. So they destroyed me, framed me, blacklisted me, made sure I'd never practice law again. Deborah's eyes widened. What did you uncover? The same kind of conspiracy that's trying to destroy you now. The call connected at 11:47 p.m. For 5 long rings, Donald thought Michael wouldn't answer. Then a voice deeper than he remembered, cautious, came through. Dad? Donald closed his eyes. Michael, I know it's been a long time. 3 years. Michael's tone was flat, guarded. What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine. I need your help with something. Professional help. Silence stretched between them like a canyon. You're asking me for help? Michael's voice carried disbelief. The man who wouldn't even tell me why he stopped practicing law? Who disappeared into maintenance work and refused to talk about it? Michael, please. This is important. So was having a father who didn't shut me out for 18 years. Donald's throat tightened. You're right. I failed you. But right now, there's a woman whose life is being destroyed by the same people who destroyed mine, and I think you can help prove it. Another pause. Then, what do you need? 24 hours later, Michael Clark arrived at Deborah's Beverly Hills estate, a lean 30-year-old, with his father's brown eyes and his mother's sharp jawline, carrying 2 laptops and a chip on his shoulder. You must be the janitor turned lawyer, Michael said, barely looking at Donald. Michael, let's just work. Deborah handed Michael hard drives containing her company's seized communication logs, security footage, and email archives. Michael sat up at her dining table, fingers flying across keyboards, code scrolling across multiple screens. Donald and Deborah watched in silence. After 2 hours, Michael leaned back, his expression dark. Someone's been inside your systems for months, he said. These emails, half of them are fabricated. Metadata's been altered to look like they originated from your servers, but the IP traces route back to a proxy network in Houston. Houston? Donald's blood went cold. Michael pulled up a corporate registry. The proxy network is registered to a shell company owned by Dawson Energen, a fossil fuel conglomerate. They've been conducting corporate espionage, planting false evidence, building a case to destroy your clean energy tech before it reaches the market. Deborah's face went pale. They framed me? Completely. And they paid your lawyer to disappear. Donald stood abruptly, his hands shaking. Dawson Energen. Michael looked up. You know them? 20 years ago, Donald said slowly, I uncovered evidence that Dawson Energen covered up a worker's death at their Texas refinery. When I tried to expose them, they destroyed my career, framed me, blacklisted me. The same people. Michael stared at his father, really seeing him for the first time in years. They've been doing this for decades? Yes. Deborah stood, her voice steady now. Then we exposed them. All of it. Donald met her eyes, and for the first time since stepping forward in that courtroom, he felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Hope. Michael closed his laptop. Then we'd better move fast. If they know we're digging, they'll come after all of us. The pounding on Donald's apartment door came at 2:17 a.m. He jolted awake on his couch, heart racing. For a moment, he thought it was a dream. Then the pounding came again, desperate, frantic. Donald opened the door to find Mildred J. Bowles standing in his hallway. Mascara streaked down her face, hands trembling violently. Mildred? Donald had only met Deborah's COO once, briefly. What are you? I can't do this anymore, she choked out, pushing past him into the apartment. I can't. They're going to kill her. They're going to kill all of us. Donald closed the door quickly. Slow down! Who's going to… Dawson Energen? Mildred collapsed onto his couch, sobbing. It was me. I'm the one who sabotaged everything. I planted the fake engineering drafts. I copied Deborah's sensitive data. I staged the emails that made it look like she stole technology. She looked up at Donald with red, swollen eyes. It was all me. Donald felt like the floor had dropped beneath him. Why? Mildred's voice cracked. 7 years ago, I worked for a startup in Nevada. I was young, stupid, desperate. I embezzled $80,000 to cover my mother's cancer treatments. I paid it back eventually, quietly, and thought it was buried. She wiped her face with shaking hands. 3 months ago, Dawson Energen contacted me. They had everything, bank records, falsified audit reports, evidence I'd forged. They said if I didn't help them destroy Deborah, they'd send me to prison for 10 years. Donald sat down slowly across from her. So you became their inside agent. I didn't have a choice. Mildred's voice rose, desperate. They told me exactly what to do. Plant fake documents in our system. Copy prototype designs and alter them. Send emails from Deborah's account that made her look guilty. I hated every second of it. But I was terrified. Anna and Amanda Fox? Deborah's lawyer? Mildred reached into her jacket and pulled out a small flash drive with trembling fingers. It's all on here. Dawson Energen created a shell company, Meridian Solutions, and transferred $3.2 million to Amanda's law firm 2 weeks before trial. She didn't quit. She was paid to disappear. Donald took the flash drive, his mind racing. There's more, Mildred whispered. Bank records showing payments to the prosecution's expert witnesses. Emails between Dawson executives planning the entire operation. Internal memos admitting Deborah's technology could destroy their petroleum market share. Her voice broke again. They're not just trying to win a lawsuit. They're trying to erase her. Donald stood, his jaw tight. Does Deborah know you're here? No. But she needs to. And you need that evidence before they realize I've turned. Mildred's eyes filled with fresh tears. I'm so sorry. I destroyed everything she built because I was too afraid to fight back. Donald looked at the flash drive in his hand, the key to everything. You just did fight back, he said quietly. Deborah's Beverly Hills mansion sat behind 12-foot walls, motion sensors, and a security system that cost more than most people's homes. It didn't matter. At 3:42 a.m., every alarm in the house erupted simultaneously a deafening electronic scream that shattered the silence. Donald bolted upright from the guest room bed. Through the window, he saw security floodlights blazing across the lawn. Then he heard something that made his blood freeze. Gunfire. "Michael! Deborah!" Donald sprinted into the hallway, just as Michael emerged from his room, laptop clutched under his arm. "Someone's breaching the perimeter," Michael shouted over the alarms. Multiple hostiles, heavily armed. An explosion rocked the east wing. Windows shattered. The lights flickered and died. Deborah ran from her bedroom, barefoot, eyes wide with terror. "What's happening? We need to move. Now." Donald grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the staircase. "Where's your panic room?" "Basement beneath the wine cellar." Another explosion, closer this time. The front door blew inward with a metallic shriek. Tactical flashlight beams sliced through the smoke. Donald shoved Deborah and Michael down the basement stairs. Behind them, he heard boots, heavy, fast, coordinated, professional. They burst into the wine cellar. Deborah pressed a hidden panel, and a section of the floor slid open, revealing a steel staircase descending into darkness. "Go, go!" Donald pushed them inside, slamming the reinforced door shut behind them. The electronic locks engaged with a heavy thunk. The panic room was small, 12 by 12 feet, concrete walls, a single computer terminal, emergency supplies. Michael immediately connected his laptop to the terminal. "I'm accessing the security cameras," he said, fingers flying. 6 hostiles. Military-grade equipment. They're setting charges on the panic room door. Deborah grabbed her phone, hands shaking. "I'm calling everyone I know in Washington. FBI, DOJ, senators, anyone who'll listen." Donald scanned the room, grabbing anything that could be used as a weapon, a fire extinguisher, a crowbar from the emergency kit, a heavy wrench. "Michael, who sent them?" Michael's face glowed blue in the laptop light. "Tracing their communications now." "Got it." Digital footprints lead to Black Ridge Tactical Solutions, a private military contractor. Their client registry shows... Jesus! They're on Dawson Energen's payroll. An explosion shook the ceiling. Concrete dust rained down. "They're cutting through," Donald said, positioning himself between the door and Deborah. Another blast. The steel door glowed red-hot, where plasma torches bit into metal. Deborah was on her third call, voice desperate. "Senator Morrison, this is Deborah Mijares. Armed mercenaries are trying to kill me in my home right now." Michael looked up suddenly. "Wait. I'm seeing massive law enforcement GPS signatures converging on this location. FBI tactical units, LAPD SWAT." "What?" Deborah lowered her phone. Someone tipped them off, before the attack even started. Above them, new sounds different. Shouting, more gunfire, but from multiple directions now. "FBI! Drop your weapons!" Shots fired. Suspects. Engaging. The cutting stopped. Through the security feed, Michael watched federal agents in tactical gear flood the property, overwhelming the mercenaries. Within 90 seconds, all 6 attackers were on the ground, zip-tied, surrounded. Donald lowered the wrench, his entire body shaking with adrenaline. Michael looked at his father. "Mildred? She must have called the FBI before coming to you?" Deborah sank against the wall, tears streaming down her face. "She saved our lives." The raids happened simultaneously at 6 a.m. across 3 time zones. In Houston, FBI agents stormed Dawson Energen's corporate headquarters, seizing servers, arresting CEO Richard Dawson and 5 senior executives as they arrived for morning meetings. Employees watched in shock as their leaders were walked out in handcuffs, faces covered, cameras flashing. In San Jose, federal agents raided the offices of Black Ridge Tactical Solutions, arresting the security contractor who'd coordinated the Beverly Hills attack and seizing files linking the company to dozens of corporate espionage operations. In Washington, D.C., a prominent energy lobbyist named Gerald Hicks was arrested at his Georgetown townhouse, still in his bathrobe, as agents carried out boxes of documents, proving he'd orchestrated payments to witnesses, judges, and law firms on behalf of Dawson Energen. And in Sacramento, Amanda Fox, Deborah's vanished lawyer, was found hiding in a Marriott under a fake name. She surrendered without resistance, her $3.2 million payment already frozen by federal order. By noon, the charges against Deborah D. Mijares were officially dismissed. By 2 p.m., every major news network had picked up the story. Janitor exposes billion-dollar conspiracy. Courthouse custodian saves billionaire. Uncovers corporate cover-up. The man in the green uniform who wouldn't stay silent. Donald stood outside the Los Angeles Federal Building, Deborah beside him, Michael just behind, as reporters swarmed with cameras, microphones, and shouted questions. "Mr. Clark, how does it feel to bring down one of America's largest energy corporations?" "Donald, will you be taking the bar exam now?" "Miss Mijares, do you plan to sue Dawson Energen?" Deborah stepped to the microphone, her voice steady and strong. 3 weeks ago, I sat alone in a courtroom, abandoned by my lawyer, watching my life collapse. Then a man I'd never met, a janitor, stepped forward and said he would fight for me. She turned to Donald, eyes glistening. "Donald, Clark didn't just save my company. He saved my life. And he exposed a criminal conspiracy that's been destroying people for decades." The cameras turned to Donald. He stood there in a borrowed suit, still looking uncomfortable, still looking like a man who'd spent 18 years trying to disappear. "I'm not a hero," Donald said quietly into the microphone. "I'm just someone who got tired of watching powerful people crush the innocent." Behind him, Michael stepped forward and put a hand on his father's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Michael said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. Donald's throat tightened. He turned to his son, the boy he'd raised alone, the man he'd pushed away in shame, and saw forgiveness in his eyes. "Thank you," Donald whispered. As the cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, Deborah took Donald's hand. They'd fought together. They'd survived together. And now, standing in the California sunlight, with the truth finally exposed, they'd won. 2 weeks later, Donald stood in courtroom 14, one final time. Judge Helen looked down at him from the bench, her stern expression softened by something that might have been respect. "Mr. Clark," she said, her voice carrying through the packed gallery, "in 30 years on this bench, I have never witnessed what you accomplished in this courtroom. You exposed corruption, saved an innocent woman, and reminded us all what justice truly means." She paused. "Your courage and brilliance honor this court. Thank you." The gallery erupted in applause. Donald stood there, overwhelmed, as reporters captured the moment, and Deborah smiled beside him with tears in her eyes. 3 days later, Deborah held a press conference announcing the Clark Justice Initiative, ***, a $50 million foundation, providing legal representation for wrongfully accused individuals who couldn't afford defense. "Donald L. Clark fought for me when I had no one," Deborah told the cameras. "Now, we'll fight for everyone who needs a voice." That same afternoon, the California State Bar contacted Donald directly. 3 prominent attorneys, moved by his story, offered to sponsor his bar examination, waiving the fees and providing study support. For the first time in 20 years, Donald Clark had a path back to the law. One evening, as the sun set over downtown Los Angeles, Donald and Deborah stood on the rooftop terrace of her estate, the city sprawling beneath them in a sea of lights. "I need to tell you something," Deborah said softly, turning to face him. "You didn't just save my career, Donald. You saved my life. When I sat alone in that courtroom, I'd given up. I thought the world had decided I was guilty, and there was nothing I could do." Her voice trembled. "Then you stepped forward. A stranger, a janitor, someone who had every reason to stay invisible. And you fought for me anyway." Donald looked at her, this brilliant woman who'd built empires and changed industries, and saw something he'd never expected to see again in anyone's eyes. Hope. Real hope. You gave me hope again, Deborah whispered. Not just in the system. In people. In the possibility that someone might care enough to fight. Donald's throat tightened. For 18 years, he'd believed his story was over, that he was meant to live in shadows. Forgotten. Invisible. But standing here now, with his son speaking to him again, with a future in law opening before him, with this extraordinary woman looking at him like he mattered. You gave me hope too, Donald said quietly. I thought I'd lost the fight forever. But you reminded me who I used to be, who I still could be. Deborah took his hand, and as the city lights flickered to life below them, Donald L. Clark, the janitor who refused to stay silent, finally allowed himself to believe in a future beyond the shadows. He fought for her when no one else would, and in doing so, he reclaimed the fight he thought he had lost forever.